And welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com.
And I'm Pete Wright, also from The Next Reel.
We are, of course, looking at Jon Favreau's 2008 film, Iron Man. And joining us this week, we have Joe and Andrew Darowski. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for having us. I am Joe, just so your listeners can start to associate the voice with the name.
Right, and I am Andrew.
We've crossed the 100-minute mark. We are looking at Iron Man Minute 101. On today's show, the minute starts with a gift from a dumb friend. And it ends with Rhodey on the hunt for his old friend.
Rhodey. Rhodey's like, he's like the golden retriever returning home after a run across the grand mountainscape.
So if Rhodey's the golden retriever, who is Dummy? Is Dummy the Rin Tin Tin?
It's the lassie. He's
wait, where's the lassie in this case?
Right.
Are we setting up a weird competition between rescue dogs?
I feel like somehow we
I
have.
think Lassie wins that competition, right? I mean,
yeah, Lassie's the ultimate rescue dog, and Lassie was big on like bringing the tool that you need, right? Like your foot's stuck in a rope, and Lassie brings you a knife. So I think
That's a good point.
Dummy is the Lassie in this case,
or maybe the Saint Bernard with the rum.
Oh, that's a rescue dog I had forgotten about. There are a lot, aren't there?
Right. I'm just saying, dogs are incredibly useful.
How have we not had a movie about a Saint Bernard rescue dog?
Right? That seems
the only
like
Saint Bernard movies
are
the Beethoven movies, and that's not a snowbound rescue.
That is the opposite of a helpful dog.
No. Yes.
Somebody needs to get on that. And if we can tie it into the MCU, all the better. I'm sure there will be one in Endgame. We're recording this before Endgame is open.
Oh my goodness, that's right. Nobody knows. Oh. All right. Rein it in. What are we doing?
Okay, so just to play catch up real quick, just so everyone remembers where we are. Tony knows that Obadiah has tried to have him killed, and that Obadiah is now going to kill Pepper because Tony got her involved, and that Obadiah has built his own version of the suit. Pepper knows that Obadiah tried to have Tony killed because she saw the video, and that he's building a secret suit because she saw the blueprints. And also she knows that Tony's not answering her calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have she's with Agent Coulson. So he and his men theoretically are in the same camp as Pepper. Now, Pepper last saw Tony working in his lab. He sent her on this mission. So theoretically, she doesn't know that Obadiah might have taken out his RT device out of his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Rhodey. He was driving, and Pepper called him and said, Obadiah tried to have Tony killed, and Tony's not answering my calls, so go check on him. So that's where everybody is.
Do we know what Rhodey was doing? Like, where was he going on a date? Was he heading somewhere?
He is certainly wearing date clothes.
He was in his truck when we saw him talking to Pepper. That's all we know, but I would love to know. I mean, he's awfully close, too.
It seems like in this movie, for the most part, Rhodey is waiting for Tony to get his attention in some way. Like, almost every scene, whatever Rhodey's doing, he's just waiting for Tony to be there.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm training some Air Force pilots, but Tony's here, so I'm going to ditch them. Hey, I'm in a combat scenario, but I need to talk to Tony.
That was how they pitched Terrence Howard on this movie. They say, hey, Terrence, you're just going to be waiting around a lot for RDJ. Is that cool? Yeah, totally cool.
There's nobody I want to watch more.
That's right.
Did you track how many times, how many lines of dialogue Rhodey has in this minute?
In this minute? In this particular one?
In this minute, he says the word Tony 3 times.
He does, right?
But wait for it, because next minute we may hear the word Tony a few more times. It reminds me back in my high school days in a drama class, I was rehearsing a Shakespeare scene, and the phrase words, words, words. It's in Hamlet. He just says words, words, words. And the teacher's like, you have to say words differently for each one. And I was wondering if Favreau was like, no, Tony, I need a different Tony. That was the same Tony.
That's like that. What was that? It was a monologue that Pete, that our buddy used to do. And it was like, you were trying to get somebody's attention. You just kept, the monologue was virtually all you were saying is, hey, you, look at me, look at me.
Look at me.
But you kept saying it in different ways.
Is it from Three Amigos? The look up here, look up here.
No.
Look at her, look at her.
Hey, you guys.
Oh, that would be a good one. Oh no, but yeah, it's exactly that sort of thing. Whereas, like, how many ways can you say Tony?
Tony.
In this minute, it's 3 ways.
Tony. Okay,
That's 3.
we've got 3.
So I have a question based on like you're setting the stage, which I very much appreciate. You know, coming in at 100 minutes into the movie. Is it weird that they put so much stress on Pepper being in danger? Like, isn't it danger enough that a mad genius has access to unlimited power and wants to like propagate war on an unprecedented scale? Like, isn't that cause enough for Iron Man to step up? Or do we need to have a damsel in distress?
We're getting into that territory. This is the territory where they were obviously doing rewrites, trying to figure out how we're going to end this thing, because Obadiah Stane wasn't the bad guy, and now he is. And so what are we going to do? And a lot of these little things that are happening here may fall into that category where it's like, do we need to have this? Maybe not, but here it is.
I mean, I will say in defense of Pepper, she's not like, the captive damsel in distress. She puts herself in trouble because she is doing something heroic, right?
Right. That is fair.
She is there with the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, leading them into danger to stop Obadiah Stane.
And she knows the shortcuts. As we've established in prior minutes, she is able, and she's a fantastic navigator and driver. She is capable.
But it does seem like they're stressing that, like, he is going to hurt Pepper.
As if, and believe me, I'm backing your point. Like, why do we need to insert this sort of gravitas of hero saves damsel when really she's doing fine? Everybody can just be on team, we don't like Obadiah, and let's just even the playing field a little bit. You're absolutely right. And it feels like an appendix. It just feels like something that's unwarranted, unearned.
Yeah, and they like, because they gave Obadiah like some kind of creepy lines about that to give Tony that push. That was a couple minutes ago, maybe last week, when he's doing his discussion and tearing out Tony's heart, and then he has to make this weird comment about, like, it's a shame about Pepper. It's like, we don't need that. Yeah. I think the fate of the world and war on an unprecedented scale is sufficient.
But I think this is getting into like the famous quote attributed to Stalin. I can't remember if it actually was, where he said, a single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. It's giving both, right? We're going to give you both the personal stakes and the abstract threat of destruction, which in later Marvel films, I know sometimes some people may not have seen all of them, but sometimes they lean a little hard into the abstract fate of the whole universe, and you start to feel disconnected from the stakes of that actually, versus a very personal, one-on-one situation.
Well, that's a good point. And honestly, I mean, it is interesting because Pepper really ended up putting herself into this situation. And I know this was kind of, you already had said this, but she came here trying to be heroic, trying to stop him. She's leading the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. here to kind of take down Obadiah. At this point, yes, Obadiah has threatened Pepper to Tony, but I mean, all he's been doing is like, he's kind of checking out his equipment. That's it. Like, he doesn't know that, people might be heading his direction, as we've learned from Pepper and these agents. So theoretically, what I guess what I'm getting to is, what would he be doing? Like, if she wasn't there, if that wasn't happening, is he going to get into the suit and
rampage?
Like, start searching LA for her? Yeah. Is he just going to tear around the city like King Kong, destroying things? I'm very curious what would have happened. Where would that have gone?
Yeah, I see that disconnect there, what you're pointing out. So, yeah, he made that threat to Tony that was very specific, but it's not like he went and, or even told his goons, go get Pepper. He's just like, no, I'm going to go plug in the battery.
With no one else around, we're not going to run any tests. I'm just going to plug it in. I'll hop in. And, like, yeah, it's always fun to, like, play out in movies. Like, okay, take the villain, And like, what if the hero didn't show up right then? And like, in this case, it's like, what is Obadiah going to do if, Tony doesn't show up and Pepper and the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. don't show up? Like, is he just going to run some tests? And then agents show up. He's like, well, I guess I'll murder people.
Right. This is where some of the logic flaws start showing in with the way that they changed everything around to avoid the Mandarin or the Crimson Dynamo as the bad guys and save Stain for the second film and decide, you know what, let's just run with this Jeff Bridges guy. He's pretty good.
Which, admittedly, when you watch it in the theater, you don't really notice those things. Like, they've got good pacing on all of this, and the tension is like moving at an appropriate pace. We've got like 3 different locations in this 1 minute.
Right. Yeah.
So they're moving you along, and you're just on for the ride, unless you're doing it minute by minute.
Yeah, this is a unique to the format. Yeah.
Well, before we get there, though, we should talk a little bit. We've got this great scene with Tony and DUM-E, which is, I think it's a great payoff for everything that they've been building. And it's a little sentimental, but it works really well because we've been playing with these idiot robots for so long, with blasting him with the extinguisher and just all these things. And here we finally get this. It's pretty sweet little thing where he kind of, DUM-E saw apparently that Tony couldn't reach this box and lowers it for him. And then this is where we get that really very anthropomorphic view of it, like it's a little face just kind of looking at him and making these little coos and whistles at him.
Can I ask a question? And I don't know if maybe you did discuss this last week.
What's that?
What is the nature of Tony's ailment in this situation? Because the magnet, like this is kind of a big picture question for Iron Man, the movie, and in the cinematic universe, but like, his heart still exists. That magnet is just keeping the shrapnel out, but now the magnet's not there. So why is he looking all pale and stuff? Like, shouldn't he just be kind of stressed, but like otherwise functional?
He also just came out of his paralysis.
Okay.
So that's part of it. Obadiah had used the paralysis little, trigger thing.
That's fair. I was not counting on that.
He looks bad here, but he doesn't look quite as bad as he did when he was paralyzed.
With the veins popping on the forehead.
Right, veins. Now the blood in his ears has magically disappeared, but other than that, he's looking a little ragged. But and this is something that we struggle with because as soon as this thing gets popped out, he does react all of a sudden like, oh my God, my heart. Well, and last time when Pepper unplugged his RT device and swapping it, he goes into cardiac arrest. And it's very illogical. Like, why would that happen?
Yeah.
Do these shrapnel pieces that are stuck in him all of a sudden just like charge at his heart? I mean, there's no logic there.
And there's like that's a sizable tube that Pepper reaches her hand into where there should be organs. I bet you guys talked about that.
Or, I don't know, sternum or spine, ribs.
Yeah, like, he should have a sternum. Like, you can't do CPR to this man anymore.
No, right. Yeah, and you get it, like, even when he throws this box down on the ground, like, he kind of rolls to the side, and you can see, like, they obviously, like, did some CG work kind of filling in that hole, so you can actually kind of see down that tube a little bit. And it's like, that thing is probably a good 6 inches, maybe not 6 inches, but 4 inches at least, deep down into his body. I mean, that's a sizable amount of material they removed from him.
Yeah, where typically your heart would be.
It's Yinsen the Wonder Surgeon.
Typically, yes.
Typically.
Yeah,
right.
for most people, that's about
human persuasion.
But does he only have 3 chambers now or something? Like, what's going on?
I mean, it's one of those things, kind of like Andrew said, like, if you're just watching the movie in the theater, you maybe don't question it, but like, you almost start to think of this chess piece as like a battery that is powering his heart, or literally as a heart, but then that's not how it's functioning when we get actual technical descriptions, but then that's often how he reacts when anyone is messing with it.
Yeah, it's like, if this is gone, then I will shut down. Not if this is gone, the shrapnel will travel the rest of the way into my heart and shred me.
And eventually, over the course of minutes, hours, possibly days, I will die.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always much more immediate.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Seconds.
It's always in the seconds to minutes category.
I guess in the second movie they kind of deal with that a little bit more, where they can argue that like the poisoning is having a physical effect on his energy levels and things like that. But in this one, they don't really have that.
Yeah, no, it largely ends up just being something you have to buy into, or you're never going to make it through this. And in the world of Marvel comic book movies, I think that's what largely makes it work, is that buying into that fantasy of it. Because if you can't buy into it, if you're looking at it as a realistic, piece of thing that's stuck into his body, then there's just no way it's ever going to work.
Yeah.
Speaking of this moment with Tony and this replacement battery that's being handed to him, I remember kind of reacting to this in the theater, but certainly in some rewatches, I was like, he goes from very frail and almost lifeless to very aggressive in breaking this box. Like
Gotta smash it.
He's not letting gravity do the work. He really leans into that rollover and that smash on the ground.
Yeah. Where did that little adrenaline boost come from?
Well, and that's funny because I was looking it up, because according to the script, it's actually identified as lucite, which is basically like an acrylic.
Wouldn't it bounce?
Yeah, acrylic boxes like that are fairly tough, and they don't shatter.
Right, exactly. You can't really break it. So,
you might be able to crack it, and then you got to kind of pry it open, and maybe with a screwdriver.
There's really no way that it would have shattered like this. Because, I mean, it looks like they use candy glass, and it looks like he's really shattering it because he's like covering his face and stuff's going everywhere. Yeah, I think it all... I don't know. I actually really like all of a sudden the energy that he has to smash it, but it does seem like, where did that energy come from? Maybe it's just his last bit of energy before he kind of collapses.
Well, and then we cut away, right? We cut away over to what is going on elsewhere in another secret lab. And we are to presume at this point that Tony is able to put the device in his chest with all of this new fount of energy that he has found, this reserve.
But his hands are too big, aren't they?
Maybe. How is he able to snap this in, right? That is the big question.
Or does DUM-E do it?
And I feel like that may be the central cliffhanger to this minute. I know we have other stuff to talk about, but where we find Tony in the next minute is also... it's a place of concern for me.
I think this is what Joe would call a King Kong cut.
Yes. Famously, in the original King Kong film, they gas King Kong on Skull Island after everyone has been killed, except for, the few lone surviving humans.
Yeah.
And then the next cut is King Kong strapped onto the boat. And chained up.
And there's like 5 humans that could have helped move him.
So, someone asked, how did King Kong get there? And the director said, as long as he's there in the next edit, no one cares. And so now, with the impossible thing being done off camera and just having happened because it's what had to happen for this, for the story to progress, it often gets referred to as a King Kong cut. And yeah, so Tony's hands reaching in, or be it DUM-E helping somehow, whatever happens is kind of a King Kong cut there.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to complain about it anyway.
I would have loved to see Tony trying and see, because Pepper gives him a shock. We have that little great operation gag. I would love to see him doing it and really trying with his big clumsy hands and giving himself shocks the whole time.
And then Rhodey comes down and it's like, Rhodey, you famously have small hands. Perfect.
I knew there was a reason I liked you.
What do you guys think about the fact that, or how the film positioned this life-saving device, that it's there? Okay, the villain has wounded him, but the Chekhov's gun solution, I guess. It's not the gun, but it's the Chekhov's medic medicine pack was presented much earlier in the film. Do you feel like that all worked?
I do. I actually like it. I think that it was a nice way to kind of allow for it to be there. It didn't necessarily feel like it was a Chekhov's gun, just the way that it was kind of this sentimental thing coming from Pepper. I don't know. I thought they set it up really nicely.
Yeah,
I did too. I feel like that's why, to me, this isn't a Chekhov's gun, right? Because it's something that was earned in the emotional resonance of their relationship.
Yeah,
it deserved a place on his table, regardless of whether it was going to be used later.
Absolutely, I think you're right.
I like it because the scene when he gets it like it serves its whole purpose there. Like that, if it had never been referenced again,
right.
the audience was satisfied. It didn't feel like this was a setup. Sometimes when you feel like, oh, that's just a setup, it's because you feel like this is just a hook for a future moment. And Pepper giving him that with that label, it all felt earned right then and there.
Exactly.
And the same goes for DUM-E being there to hand it to him. Is like they've done all that they needed to with DUM-E to, you know, with the comedic effect and the fire extinguisher and everything like that. So if he hadn't shown up and there was some other resolution, it's fine. But having it here, it's like, oh, this is great too.
Yeah, and you know what I really like about DUM-E here is that every time we're working with DUM-E and Tony elsewhere in the film, DUM-E is being chastised or castigated somehow by doing something stupid or preparing to do something stupid. And this is one of those sequences that allows us as the audience to learn, oh, that's why Tony keeps him around, because sometimes he does smart things.
Yeah, right.
You know, I felt sort of rewarded by that DUM-E actually serves a purpose beyond like shining the car in the background of the scene, which was funny, but you know.
Right, but we actually get him. And that's, I think, the smartest way and the most effective way a screenwriter and director and really just the filmmaking team can do their setups where you don't realize it's being set up, like you pointed out earlier. You guys pointed out. And I think these are all really cleanly done, and it makes them really effective when we have the moments here in this minute.
Meanwhile, back in the basement of the secret lair.
Oh, the other basement.
We cut, this is, the other secret lair. It's a hard cut. We don't get a Star Wars wipe, and it goes straight to the shoulder of this new Fantastic Beast.
Oh, this is our first time seeing Ironmonger. I mean, other than the deleted scene that we had last week, I mean, this is, we're again really kind of looking at the back of it, but still, you're getting this look at this menacing monster that Obadiah, conveniently now all dressed in black, is looking at.
Well, he's wearing his work clothes.
It's like a black jumpsuit or something that he's decided to wear with black boots, and he's just full on bad guy now. He's really...
It's like a flight suit, right? It's like his black, like machinist technician flight suit. He's got his big boots on. He's still wearing that ring, though.
I like that you called the Ironmonger armor like this beast, because it definitely has a very different aesthetic than the much sleeker Iron Man armor. And the way it gets employed is much more, I guess, raw feeling than the finished Iron Man that we have.
Well, it feels very much, I mean, not to leap onto your King Kong comparisons again, but really, I mean, it feels like a giant gorilla. You know, it feels like a brooding. It's kind of slouched over, and it flails. I assume it will flail. I'm not allowed to watch ahead. I assume flailing will happen, but we'll see.
Well, and it feels very much like the Mark I, which I really like. I like that he basically took this Mark I from Raza and his men and just kind of amped it up, just kind of boosted it with steroids almost, and made this hulking beast in there. It's really great. I think that it's cool seeing like these real parts, like these hydraulics on the shoulders and the way that it's designed. I mean, it is this real thing. They actually built this giant thing that was like, I think they said it was like 800 pounds, and it took like 5 guys to operate this thing when they had it in the shots. It's really cool.
I did not know how much of that was physically built.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's quite a feat that they put together for this thing. Now, I mean, granted, I won't jump ahead to later in our week, but we'll get some of it that's clearly the digital version of it.
But that commitment to building it puts me in mind of Jurassic Park, but I should probably save those thoughts for a future minute this week.
Right.
Oh, we'll get there. We will.
But what I think is so funny about this particular moment is not only do we have Obadiah now in his like full on bad guy black jumpsuit, and he's kind of working with his like Frankenstein monster in the basement, but it's also a dark basement. We've got dripping water sounds in the background. There's like water. There's chains everywhere. I mean, it's like there's a witch's cauldron bubbling in the background practically. I mean, it's just like so much like straight out of like all the cliches of a horror movie. It's so funny that they went to such extremes. But I think it's also, I give them credit for making it work weirdly. I think that it all kind of comes together nicely in a fun way.
This is one though, like as soon as we cut to the basement, this is one where I remember I have a problem with it, right? Because it feels like everywhere else that we have seen Obadiah, he's polished. He's so polished. We were in his house and there's an ibex rug on his floor. Like he is a polished dude. And so this is the one where we cut to this basement. We have the witch's cauldron and the chains, and it feels like the Freddy Krueger basement. And all of a sudden, I'm a little bit out of it. It no longer feels like they've switched from who was to be a smart and like an intelligent foe, a rich antagonist, to a dumb nemesis. And it's where I start to kind of tune out.
When he just really switches to being a brute.
Yeah, he switches to being a brute. It's an inelegance that I feel like comes out of nowhere for this character.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I think they establish it with like when he has the yelling match, the great, like Tony Stark built this in a cave with a bucket of scrap. Like this is not the product he wants. He knows he's not there yet with this.
Right.
But he's being rushed into it. And maybe, going back to the earlier comment from, I think it was Andrew, if Shield and Pepper don't come running in, he just powers this up. He's like, okay, well, now I've got to fix this up, slap some paint on this, polish the edges.
Right.
So. And then he's also waiting for Tony Stark to presumably die.
Yeah, right.
Presumably, right.
Well, and that was kind of the weird thing earlier, because he leaves Tony for dead. Like, he thinks Tony's going to die. And then, and he's off to, I guess, kill Pepper, but he's being very casual about everything. It's all, I don't know, whatever is in his head, he's taking a strange turn where all of a sudden I feel like the Obadiah that we knew is no longer the Obadiah that we knew. This is kind of a crazy Obadiah that he's already kind of become here.
Without any real like instigation. Like there was no moment that said Obadiah is now
or rushed
crazy.
Beyond,
He just... Or rushed, right. There's no... And Andy, I think you did a good job of giving us the whole Tim Curry Clue moment, right, or setup, right? Where here's where everybody is. And Obadiah, in that sequence that you opened with, has no rational justification to be rushed on anything. He doesn't know enough stuff to have that switch. So I think that was a great setup, and this is the payoff. Like, there's no point to why he's doing what he's doing.
I do want to say...
Now, I wasn't mad when we started this, but I'm mad.
I do want to say one interesting thing about this Obadiah moment, which is the bulk of this minute. I think it's something like 40 seconds is just him plugging in the battery. And I just scrubbing through. There's only 3 cuts in those 40 seconds. Like, it really lingers and lets the scene breathe in a way that flies in the face of a lot of modern editing. I think it was over on Star Wars Minute. I heard them mention that in 1 minute of The Force Awakens that they were looking at, there were 29 cuts in that 1 minute.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation scene, not an action scene.
And so it's just cutting, between like 9 characters.
Right.
But this is a lot of screen time, of him stepping up to this behemoth and working, plugging into the much more cavernous gap that he has to work with in the chest cavity of Ironmonger instead of in Tony Stark. And then, once more gazing up at it. And so the pace is, it's almost... surprising how deliberate everything is in this minute.
Yeah, it's very patient. Favreau really took his time and allowed for that, which I think is great, especially with a guy like Jeff Bridges. And I think that's why I end up not having so many problems with this, despite all of these obvious issues that we're pointing out here, because you have this patient moment of Obadiah just like piecing this together and figuring it out. And then at the end, after the Ironmonger suit powers up, he just looks up at its face. And if you just watch his face, there's like this just like very subtle change in his face as he's just kind of looking at it. And you can kind of see this evil joy almost kind of growing inside of him. I mean, it's this amazing moment that, Favreau is really allowing us to have. So I end up buying into this. And that's something that I always find so interesting about this movie, because there are all these obvious problems with this whole end of it, but I still end up really liking it.
Well, I think you're right on. Like each one of these shots, these 3 setups are just luscious, and Bridges' face is lit so perfectly. And then they cut to that reverse shot where you see how luxuriously both of Bridges' hands fit inside the cavernous hole. And it is really, it is gorgeous and patient and I totally get all of that, and I love buying into it. I still go back to thinking, man, Jeff Bridges, he took like all the notes from the tent in Afghanistan and just decided to recreate Afghanistan in this basement. It's like it looks like the basement, like a field engineering setup to me, and I just wish more for him. He needs a better lair.
Yeah, this isn't. Well, I mean, it doesn't feel like his lair. It feels like a mad scientist lair, and he has not been presented as the mad scientist up to this point. This feels like the 1940s Superman serial mad scientist. Right.
Yeah, and Jeff has really been, or Stain has really been portrayed almost exclusively as a businessman and like a corrupt businessman as a villain in this movie. Like, they don't touch on his personal like engineering prowess.
No, they don't. Right. We don't know that granted, his people built this thing. All he's doing is plugging it in. So maybe it was a really obvious, like, plug A goes into port B.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
It was written on a Post-it.
Yeah. I mean, he's yelling at someone else to be as smart as Tony Stark.
See, we say that's really obvious, but we have all messed up a USB plug-in and had to like pull a giant monitor down to really get in there and
it's
look.
Upside down. No, it's the other way around. No, I did it wrong 4 times.
I swear it goes this way.
Maybe that's what Tony's doing, while Obadiah is like just because he can see everything because it's glowing too. He sees everything so clearly. He just pops his right in. And meanwhile, Tony's like, no, turned it the wrong.
He's like, it's the old version. I'm looking upside down.
Curse these big hands. Yeah, we go from this back to Tony's living room as Rhodey runs in. I don't. Do you guys have anything else with the basement?
No.
Oh, with Obadiah's basement.
We'll be back there.
Yeah, we'll be back to Obadiah's basement.
Back.
And I feel like we already touched on Rhodey. I don't know if we have anything else to say about this brief shot of Rhodey we get.
It's a ridiculous living room.
Oh yes.
Like, there's a waterfall. There's the piano. It's just ridiculous and so big.
I just feel like the light coming through the waterfall would be very distracting to try and relax in that room.
Now, I do want to point out in this shot, though, it looks, I mean, I don't know if it's just the way that it's lit, but it looks like kind of that coral glow coming through all the windows. It doesn't look like it's nighttime. All the shots we've seen of Rhodey when he takes the call from Pepper, he's driving at night. And it could be just the way that the interior of Tony's house is lit, but it looks like this shot was shot during the day.
I always took it as just kind of a weird lighting scheme in the architecture.
You'd almost have to, assuming everything else is night. This is like the one thing that stands out is like, all of a sudden we're not night anymore.
Yeah. It looks like sunset from that huge window that's right behind us. It feels like maybe the blinds are closed, but it's golden hour.
Right, exactly. Anyway. Well, we can talk more about Rhodey tomorrow. Unless you guys have something else, but I think we're good, right?
I'm good.
Well, you guys, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you out there on the interwebs?
Yeah, I host the Protagonist podcast, in which we talk about a great character and a great story every week, and you can find it on most of your pod-catching apps, whatever you're using. If you just look for the Protagonist podcast, you'd be able to find that. We have a healthy back catalog at this point. We've dropped over 200 episodes. And so I wouldn't necessarily recommend going back to the very beginning. We didn't quite know what we were doing as podcasters, but you could cherry pick the characters you want to hear an hour-long discussion about. And like I said, with a catalog of 200 episodes, there's quite a bit there.
Nice.
That's fantastic. What a great idea for a show. I love it.
I work on that with Joseph. And in addition to that, I have a Movies by Minutes podcast of my own that I do with my wife. We cover Disney movies, animated features, 1 minute at a time. We finished all of Snow White. And then we got like halfway through recording Little Mermaid, And then we had a baby.
Oh, those things.
And it was more disruptive to our podcasting than we expected.
God, babies.
Mostly because it was both of us, and we can't both podcast and take care of the baby. If only one of us had been podcasters, it would have been different.
That makes it tricky.
So we're gonna get that finished. But yeah, we've had like 50 minutes of an 80-minute movie recorded. We just need to get those other 30 minutes done. But it's been like a year.
Well, where do people find it?
Disney Animation Minute Essentials is the podcast to search for.
And both of those, the Protagonist podcast
There
and
you
Disney
go.
Animation Minute Essentials, are hosted on duelinggenre.com. Dueling Genre is a podcast network that you can go check out. I believe you had Scott Corelli on as a guest, and
That's right.
He's the owner of Dueling Genre and hosts those shows for us.
Well, it's fantastic. That should be easy for people to find that.
It's that bookmark, people. You've had it bookmarked all along.
All right, everybody. Well, that is it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at thenextreel.com/Patreon. Until next time, true believers.